I read to you from the book of Genesis chapter 1, verses 31 to chapter 2, verse 3. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God had finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day, he made it holy, because on it he rested from all his work that he had done in creation. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus and Mary, on 24th May 2015, Pope Francis released his encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. This document was so important, so serious, so urgent, so needed. But it was interesting not only in releasing the document, but how he chose to release it. Because present beside him on the podium were 4 others, because it was meant to give a message as well. One, of course, was Cardinal Turkson from Ghana, but the others were not Catholic, one of them. There was the Metropolitan from the Greek Orthodox Church. Then there was Carolyn Wu, an American woman Catholic in business ethics, and Hans Joachim Schnellnuber, a secular scientist and a leading climate researcher. The reason for choosing all these different persons was to make that he was going to present a document that was not only restricted to Christians, but to entire planet. Because when it comes to creation and the cosmos, it's not just a Catholic issue. It's something that affects all of us. And so through this wonderful document, which I hope you would have read, it calls for a radical rethinking of our relationship with nature, emphasizing the degradation that takes place in the environment, how it leads to social inequality and poverty. Creation and caring for it is part of our vocation, but not ours alone, because humanity has to live sustainably, ensuring that the earth's resources are preserved for future generations. Of course, when the Pope released the document, there were some dissenting voices, well-funded, of course, for reasons of different arguments. One of them was to attack Pope Francis. Why does the church have to get involved in these matters? Let the Pope stick to religious realities and matters of the soul. Such comments reveal their understanding, or I should say, for lack of understanding of the scriptures. Because it's not only these objections, but from where and from whom they were coming. They were saying, stay out of issues that are not directly related to faith and morals. But long before John Paul II, Pope John Paul had already recognized explicitly that care for creation was a matter of faith and morals. It has always portrayed this care for the creation as a moral issue, and the need to protect not just creation, but human life and dignity, because the ones who get affected the most are the poor and the vulnerable. Others were saying the church should stay out of politics, including political debates over the environment. But long before, Pope Benedict himself has said the church has a responsibility towards creation, and she must assert this responsibility in the public sphere. Such dissenters or opponents have missed out an important social doctrine and teaching of the church, which did not begin with Pope Francis. It has been progressively developed by previous church teaching and by earlier popes. But sadly, the social teaching of the church is not so well known. No wonder some say, sadly, that the social doctrine of the church is one of the best well-kept secrets. Scripture defines creation both as a gift but also as a responsibility. That the earth and all creation are gifts from God. As I just read from this text from the book of Genesis, what we see is God created the world and then said, it was very good. The natural world reflects God's glory and wisdom. And we who have received the gift must also have the responsibility to care for and to protect this creation. Not to be exploited for selfish gain, not to be used irresponsibly, but respect for this creation. Let me state the problem. There are about 8 million people on the planet, and already we are using up the limited resources of nature faster than nature can replace it. In less than 30 years from now, there will be 10 billion people, if we go by the progressive statistics. And if we carry on as usual, it could spell the end of the earth as we know it now. The Worldwide Fund for Nature has kept a living planet index since the year 1970. By the year 2000, it had already 30 years of data, of information. And according to their estimates, the abundance of land-based freshwater organisms fell by at least 40% over those 30 years. No wonder Mahatma Gandhi said so long ago, there is enough in this world for human need, but not enough for human greed. Because this human activity is emptying, it is damaging God's world, whether it's through the loss of biodiversity, deforestation, chemical pollution, overfishing, waste, or simply overconsumption. Nobody disputes the evidence. We simply ignore the facts. Christians are called to be environmentalists because the environment is God's precious creation. And therefore, the church keeps particularly from 1st September to 4th October every year as a time for creation. Not just the Catholic Church, but the other churches as well, to remind us of the unchanging truth of God's love for creation. And it ends particularly on 4th of October, because that is the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, who's the patron of the environment, the creation. Our own well-being, our long-term survival depends on the health of nature and the ecosystem services that it provides. Fresh air to breathe. We see the situation in Delhi. Not that some parts of Bangalore are any better when it comes to the air. Clean water to drink, unpolluted land to grow crops and so on. However, we must realize that God's concern is for the planet, and He raises up people, I would call them ecological prophets, to speak about something that's so important that sadly some world leaders prefer to ignore or even deny. What could be some of the causes and symptoms of this crisis? The Pope, in his document, Laudato Si, Care for the Common Home, speaks about some of the environmental challenges. Climate change is caused by human activity. It means that the land will warm faster than water. The mean temperature will rise at least by 2.3 times as much. And global warming is affecting human health. There's a loss of biodiversity. And these issues particularly impact the poor who live in areas where there is more environmental degradation. Pope Francis reminds us of a throwaway culture that devalues both people as well as the environment. He calls out consumerism, materialism, and individualism and the exploitation of resources that bring us to the state that we are now in. This is a topic that may not emote so much with people because that we think it directly doesn't affect us. We talk about the person, it affects us. We talk about the family, it affects us. We talk about the elderly, it affects us. But this, we might not feel such a strong emotional connect, but yet it is important because it impacts our lives in ways that we do not fully understand, and yet it does. When we see, for example, a beautiful sunset, a raindrop falling, or a tiny bird that has migrated so many miles away at the time of migration, so many miles, we get a glimpse of God's wonderful creation. You stand before a waterfall, you're just awed by that. Because God is not just a creator, God is one who sustains. And therefore, we must work in this line of sustainability to be co-workers in protecting, conserving, and enhancing creation. Therefore, as human beings, we are merely stewards of God's creation. The responsibility not as owners or dominators, but as caretakers. It involves protecting the environment, maintaining the balance, and maintaining the biodiversity. The church teaches us that taking care of the earth, of the environment, is a moral obligation. It's not just an environmental issue, it's a moral and a spiritual issue. The way we treat God's creation. In Genesis chapter 2, we read that God created us from the dust of the earth. And when we die, we go back to the earth. We are connected with this earth. We may be the crown of creation, but as stewards, not as dominators, lording it over creation and creatures. And Jesus shows us what it means when it comes to dominion, from where we get the word dominus, meaning Lord. In Mark chapter 10, verse 43, well, James and John are fighting for a place. Jesus reminds them, you shall not lord it over the people like the Gentiles do. In other words, the kind of exercising of your dominion is not to dominate. And then further, in John chapter 13, verse 13, after washing the feet of his disciples, Jesus says, you call me Lord and Master, and so I am. If I, being your Lord and Master, wash your feet, then you also must do the same as well. Because his lordship is not of domination. His lordship is not shown with a crown and a scepter, but with a basin and the towel. That is how he exercises his lordship. And therefore, our stewardship is not to dominate, but to serve and to enhance and to sustain this creation. Now, for that to happen, we need what I would like to call environmental change and ecological conversion. We are familiar with personal conversion. We are familiar with societal conversion. We need to talk about the environmental conversion. Our planet is big, but it is finite. It cannot sustain the limitless demands of unexamined consumption. You know, the brokers of the stock market might have this mantra, outside the market, there is no salvation. There is only one way for the stock market, and all the prophets of the environment are dismissed by them as the prophets of doom. Who says so? The high priests of consumerism, the shamans of materialism, the promoters of individualism, whose liturgies, and I'm saying it in inverted commas, are grandiose projects made possible with the indiscriminate ravaging of the resources of the earth. And this mentality, once it gets into us, is manifested in different ways. I have the best car. So what? Is it guzzling fuel? I have the best whatever. So what? Is it environmental friendly? If I am insecure within and want to make an impression on others, then I care a damn about resources because I've got the money and the access to it. And just because I have the access and the money, I have no right to use, when actually it will be an abuse of resources. The need of the hour in the light of limited resources of the planet Earth is simple living and high thinking. If not, we pay the price not only now, but for the generation to come. During the time of the pandemic, I did a presentation with an interfaith group, the School of Ancient Wisdom. And I did a presentation online, and it was journeying through aging and dying. And the participants were people from different faiths. Not only Christians, but Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, Parsis, Sikhs, Jains. And after I presented, one of them asked a question. He said, "What's the spiritual question of the pandemic?" So I said, I don't understand. Could you explain your question? And after he did, because his point was, is God punishing the world through the pandemic? I said, let me give you my take on it. It actually comes from a Spanish proverb. I said, God always forgives. Human beings sometimes forgive, but nature never forgives. You mess around with nature, you pay the price. The earth never forgives. If we have despoiled the earth, the response will be terrible. Let us be clear, it is not a storehouse for us to exploit. If we do not wish to repent and be converted, then the environment and the nature will force us to. And it will be so disastrous as it already is in some places. Just as individuals turn to God for personal conversion, the world can turn towards God for ecological healing through repentance, care, and responsible living. And this ecological and environmental conversion calls for a transformation of lifestyle, of culture, and of policies that will put the well-being of creation and the poor at the center of our decision-making. Pope Francis speaks about this need for an ecological conversion, change of hearts, of minds, to align with God's vision for creation. Ecological conversion will bring a sense of hope because it emphasizes the possibility of change and of renewal. It has been said that what we need today is not just an ecological movement. We need an ecological Pentecost, an outpouring of God's Spirit on all flesh to completely reorient our thinking and our way of living. What can we do? We can do things on different levels. On a personal level, on the level of our community or neighborhood, and then of course, on the level of the government or policy or structures. We need a multi-pronged response to something like that. So I'd like to quickly take you through some of things that we can do in our daily life. It's not about saving money. It's about saving creation. So sometimes we give bouquets of flowers, which we take one look and leave aside. Could give a sapling, could be a plant. We take home, plant. And that way, we make sure that we add to the greening of the earth. Bottles and bags. I mean, this is a fight that we have to have within my own circle, but I'm sure yours, is to reduce and to avoid, if possible, the use of plastic bottles. When I travel, I make sure that I take my own bottle and at any proper place, fill it, rather than keep multiplying the plastic bottles, but it takes, who knows, 500 years before it disintegrates. Bags, thankfully, we're getting more and more to be a no plastic zone. How do we reuse them? How do we recycle? Because one person's extra is another person's treasure. Thanks be to God for the Vincent de Paul and the Ladies of Charity. They make sure that so much of this is made available through other people, through recycling, donating old books or furniture, unused items. Create your own earth cleanup. Waste is everywhere, but we are so conditioned not to look at it. Can we make a difference? Sometimes in a group that gets together, cleans a place, not just to do somebody else's work, but to conscientize people that we don't treat this earth as one big dustbin. We fling things around. And faith groups, we not only meet in church for a visual, faith groups could also be involved in this because we need a faith that does justice. And then, of course, avoid excess food, excess clothing, excess luxuries and entertainment. When I was in the Philippines, there was an interesting, it was a restaurant which offered a buffet. If you left 10% of the food on the buffet plate and threw it, you had to pay twice as much. Because for some people, their eyes are bigger than their stomach. How do we, in little ways, make a difference? Indeed, all of this has to be done, but that alone will not solve the problem. We need to avoid waste. Waste of food, waste of electricity, waste of water. And I can never say it enough. Not in my place or any other place. Because this is something that people just ignore when it is something so vital. Simple things, changing your light bulbs. Where you sit on the church sometimes. Some will sit, one will sit here, another will sit there, and they want each one the individual fan rather than coming together. The same in our homes. These are simple things, but more than activity, it's creating a mentality. A mentality. Water. Taps are running. Of course, those who have resources, if there's water, they can always get a water tanker. The poor have to stand in line and wait because sometimes the taps are dry. Then, of course, the civic hygiene. You know, as I said, everybody's property is nobody's property. I look after myself and my home, and I care two hoots about the environment. You may clean your house, but you throw the garbage outside. I keep myself clean, but I don't mind spitting all over the place. We burn paper, we burn plastic, we burn rubber tires. There's so much that we can do personally on the level of the community. Organize seminars or rallies, various awareness sessions, programs, so that people begin to see how we need to care for our common home, the earth. And then, of course, we draw on the professionals to make a difference, not just an individual or societal level, but in the level of the policies of the government. Lawyers who can engage, persons working as social workers or in various forms to collaborate even with the local political leaders. In doing this, we will meet resistance. What? You think you can make a big difference? We do what we can. On the last day, we will not be called to account for the world, but we will be accountable for the actions that we failed to do. And therefore, there is hope in the face of these environmental challenges. Pope Francis speaks about a new ecological culture rooted in the care for creation that can foster hope for the future. We have one earth. It's not for us alone. We have to think of the generations to come. Quickly, the two details that I normally do. First is the detail of the icon. Today, I want to look at the color green in the icon, because green is always the color of hope. It implies new beginnings, new growth. The inner lining of her blue mantle is green. The green bonnet that she wears over her head under the blue mantle. In giving birth to Jesus, she brought hope to the world. He is our Redeemer, partly also clothed in green. The God of life, the God of creation, and the giver of life is our hope. What about the second aspect, pilgrims of hope? I have just 3 words. Let it be your mantra. Reuse, whatever you do, reuse it. Reduce, whatever, let it be a reduction of your consumption. and recycle. 3 simple words: reuse, reduce, and recycle. I'd like to conclude today with a song, with a hymn. You've sung it many times before, but in the light of our reflection today, let us sing it with new meaning. And it is, How Great Thou Art.